Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Kathy sat across from Roger, bathed in the warm glow of the upscale restaurant. Her laughter drifted out naturally, like an actress perfectly embodying her role. On the surface, she appeared at ease, savoring the evening, her eyes glistening as she whispered a playful joke to her lover. But beneath that composed facade, tension coiled tightly within her. Anxiety gnawed at her insides, a relentless sense of foreboding shadowing her every move. Each time her phone buzzed on the table, she flinched, a flash of panic flickering in her gaze before she forced another smile. Roger, on the other hand, seemed blissfully unaware, his demeanor smooth and untroubled as he sipped his wine, as if the world outside this moment simply ceased to exist. But Kathy knew better. This affair was always a risky gamble. Roger was everything her husband Ben was not: daring, electrifying, unpredictable. He had swept her into a whirlwind, a stark contrast to the steady, kind man she had married. Ben had been perfect in so many ways, a man she had once loved deeply, with all her heart. Yet here she was, entwined in an affair with Roger, caught up in something she couldn't even justify to herself. She had considered ending it countless times, fully aware that she should. Each encounter with Roger was a chance to break away, to tell him it was over. But the words always failed her, and she found herself drawn back by his irresistible pull. Tonight, however, something felt different. When her phone buzzed again, Kathy glanced down and felt her blood turn to ice. A new notification glowed on the screen. "Enjoy this evening because it will be over soon." The message was from Ben. A wave of dread washed over her, making her hands clammy and her heart thunder in her chest. She stared at the ominous words, trying to process them. How could he know? What did "it will be over soon" mean? The restaurant around her seemed to spin, the sounds fading into a distant murmur. She struggled to steady her breath, fighting to maintain her composure. Roger, noticing her sudden pallor, leaned forward, concern creasing his brow. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his hand reaching out to cover hers. But she wasn't okay. Her world was teetering on the edge of collapse, and she had no idea. Roger lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Unaware of the storm raging within her, Roger leaned in, pressing his lips to Kathy's. He continued talking, but his words blurred into the background as Kathy's mind fixated on the message. The chill of Ben's warning snaked up her spine, relentless and unnerving. She had no idea what he had planned, but one thing was certain: tonight would not end the way she had imagined. It had started about a month ago. Ben had always trusted Kathy, never questioning her late nights or outings. But one evening, when she returned late from a dinner with friends, something shifted. As she bent down to kiss him goodnight, he caught a faint trace of an unfamiliar cologne. Expensive, distinct, and undeniably not his own. It was subtle, yet enough to plant a seed of doubt. Ben wasn't the kind of man to act impulsively. He was patient, sharp, and methodical. When he caught that hint of another man's cologne, he didn't lash out or confront her right away. Instead, he began to observe, quietly and meticulously. Day by day, he noticed subtle changes. Kathy's distant gaze, her eyes flitting to her phone more frequently, the way she kept it within arm's reach at all times. Sometimes, he'd catch her smiling softly at a message, a smile that twisted his insides with cold certainty. Her behavior told him everything he needed to know. Kathy, lost in the thrill of her affair, was too blinded by excitement to realize how careless she had become. She believed she was being discreet, that her secret was safe, but Ben saw through it all. And he wasn't simply waiting in silence out of hurt or bewilderment. He was strategizing. Every gentle word, every affectionate gesture was deliberate, a mask concealing the storm that churned inside him. Ben wasn't one to lash out in anger. That wasn't his style. No, Ben was waiting for the perfect moment, a time when Kathy would be too entangled in her deceit to anticipate the reckoning that awaited her. Her phone buzzed again, and a jolt of fear shot through her. With shaking hands, she glanced down at the screen to see another message from Ben. "Do you really think no one will find out about this?" The words swam before her eyes, and a wave of panic gripped her. She struggled to keep her expression calm, her fingers curling tightly around her phone. But the pressure inside her was mounting, a suffocating force she could no longer contain. Leaving wasn't an option. Not here. Not in this exclusive restaurant where every eye could so easily track her movements. The anxiety clawed at her, creeping up her spine like an inescapable shadow. The walls felt as though they were pressing in, squeezing the air from her lungs. Roger's voice became a distant murmur, indistinct and irrelevant as her gaze swept the room. Everything appeared normal. Diners engaged in conversations, laughter, the clinking of silverware. Yet Kathy felt the undercurrent of dread pull tighter. Then she saw them. At a table just across the room, faces unmoving, were her relatives, her uncle, her cousin with his wife, and worst of all, her sister. Their eyes were locked on hers, heavy with silent condemnation. Not a word was spoken, but their expressions said it all. They knew. They knew everything. Kathy's hands trembled, and the air felt thin as her mind raced. Her family had always been deeply conservative, unyielding in their values, and betrayal was something they could never forgive. The weight of their judgment pressed down on her chest, making it almost impossible to breathe. Her carefully guarded secret life was slipping away, unraveling before her eyes. One by one, they stood from their seats, their gaze still fixed on her, full of silent condemnation. Kathy could only watch in horror as they turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving her to drown in their silent verdict. Her thoughts spun wildly. This had to be Ben. He had known all along, and now he had made sure her family knew too. The walls of her double life were collapsing, and there was no stopping it. Just days before, Ben had met with Kathy's relatives in private. He had been composed and methodical as he laid out the evidence he'd painstakingly collected. Photos, messages, every damning piece of her betrayal. At first, they were incredulous, shocked by what he showed them. But Ben was steady and resolute, leaving no room for doubt. He asked them not to intervene, not to confront her, but to witness how she would unravel her own life. Their agreement had been silent, but their disappointment spoke volumes. Now, they were there to witness it all unravel. As Ben's carefully orchestrated plan played out around Kathy, the once warm and welcoming restaurant now felt cold and suffocating. It seemed as though everyone could see the guilt etched on her face. Roger, sitting across from her, noticed her growing unease. His brows knitted with concern as he leaned in closer. "Kathy, what's going on?" he asked softly, worry tinging his voice. "You're shaking. Are you okay?" Kathy forced a smile, but it was thin and unconvincing. She couldn't bring herself to tell him, couldn't explain the storm raging in her mind. The condemning stares of her family, Ben's cryptic messages. Everything was closing in, threatening to break her apart. She tried to steady herself, but the panic surged relentlessly. "I love you, Kathy," Roger said, his voice brimming with sincerity as he took her hand in his, holding it tightly. "If something's wrong, we'll figure it out. I won't leave you. Let's get out of here. Somewhere more private, quieter. Just you and me." Kathy's chest constricted. She wanted to agree, to escape this suffocating reality, but the words caught in her throat. Just as she summoned the courage to speak, a faint buzz cut through the tension. Roger's phone. He glanced at the screen, and in an instant, everything changed. His face went pale, the easy smile vanished, and his eyes filled with something Kathy had never seen before. Fear. Without a word, he stood abruptly, pulling out his wallet and hastily counting out cash to cover the bill. The suddenness of it left Kathy stunned. "Roger, wait. What's going on? Did something happen?" she asked, her voice rising with alarm. But he didn't look at her or respond. His movements were hurried, almost panicked, as if he needed to be anywhere but there. Kathy's hand shot out to grab his arm, desperate for answers, her mind spinning with questions. "Roger, talk to me. Let me come with you," Kathy pleaded, but Roger raised his hand, halting her. His voice was firm, colder than she had ever heard it. "No, I have serious problems to deal with. This will take a long time." Kathy's heart sank at his tone. She had never seen him like this. As he turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of his phone screen before it went dark. It was a message from a woman, but she hadn't seen the name. "Roger, please," she called out, her voice cracking, but he didn't stop. He threw her one last look, his expression stern and distant, sending a chill through her. "Goodbye, Kathy," he muttered, and then he was gone, leaving her standing alone. Stunned, Kathy sat in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. She had believed Roger was free, that he had no other commitments, but as the pieces started to come together, the truth began to dawn on her. He had been hiding something all along. A wife. A life he never mentioned. The man she thought she knew was wrapped in his own web of secrets. Ben had known about Roger's double life long before Kathy ever suspected. Roger wasn't just another man seeking a fling. He had a wife, and their marriage was entwined in complex business and property dealings that made divorce impractical. Instead of ending his marriage, Roger had sought out mistresses to fulfill his fantasies in secret. Ben, patient and strategic, had uncovered this secret and, just a few days before tonight's dinner, discreetly slipped the details to Roger's wife. Now, everything was unraveling for Roger. As Kathy sat alone at the table, it struck her. Roger wasn't going to comfort her. He wasn't coming back. He would vanish from her life, just as he had disappeared from the restaurant. Kathy's phone vibrated again, shattering the silence that had enveloped her. Tears filled her eyes as she struggled to hold them back. Roger was gone. Her family had turned their backs on her, and now she was truly alone. The screen lit up with another message from Ben. "Don't go home, Kathy. You don't have a home anymore." Her heart raced as panic surged within her, the room beginning to blur around her. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair, desperate to fix things. There had to be a way to salvage this. Kathy hurried out of the restaurant, driven by a frantic need to stop her world from collapsing. Her breaths came in short gasps as she fumbled for her keys, finally managing to get into her car. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel. The engine roared to life, and she sped off toward the apartment, desperate to make sense of it all. The drive felt endless, her mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. He couldn't mean it. He wouldn't just throw her out, would he? She tried to calm herself, clinging to the hope that somehow she could talk to Ben and explain everything. But deep down, she knew the truth. He had been planning this for a long time. When Kathy finally arrived at the apartment, a sick feeling crept over her. The door swung open easily, but the warmth she had always felt stepping inside was gone. The place felt cold and empty. Her footsteps echoed through the room as her eyes locked on the sight before her. In the center of the living room were several cardboard boxes, neatly packed with her belongings, her clothes, her shoes, her books, all reduced to mere boxes. On the shelf, 2 stacks of papers awaited her. One was a pile of divorce papers, and the other was a torn-up lease. Kathy's breath caught in her throat, her chest tightening as the reality of it hit her. Ben had ended the lease. She had to leave by tomorrow. Tears welled up in her eyes, her body shaking as the sobs finally broke free. Kathy collapsed to her knees, clutching the divorce papers as the weight of her choices crashed down on her. Ben had planned it all with chilling precision. The apartment had always been in his name, a detail Kathy had never thought twice about, but it gave him the leverage he needed. While she had been at dinner with Roger, believing her world was still intact, Ben had moved quickly and efficiently, packing her belongings into boxes and placing them where she couldn't miss them. He signed the divorce papers, laying them out beside the torn-up lease, an unmistakable signal that her life there was over. There were no angry words, no dramatic confrontations. Ben didn't want a scene. He wanted Kathy to realize what she had lost when it was already too late. As Kathy sat on the floor, tears streaming down her face, her phone buzzed one last time. The final message from Ben appeared on the screen. "Kathy, you have made your choice." Lying on the cold floor of the apartment, Kathy sobbed uncontrollably, the weight of everything crushing her. The space that had once been filled with warmth and love now felt like a tomb, cold and empty, with only the boxes of her belongings as reminders of the life she had lost. Her tears felt endless as she struggled to grasp the finality of it all. In a desperate haze, Kathy reached for her phone, her trembling fingers hovering over Ben's contact before she pressed call. The phone rang, the long beeps echoing in the silent apartment, each one tearing through her heart like a knife, but no one answered. Ben was ignoring her. She remembered the plans they had made together, the life they were supposed to build. In 3 months, they were going to buy a house and leave this city behind for a fresh start. They had even talked about starting a family. They had dreams and plans for the future, all rooted in their love. Now, because of one reckless affair, everything was destroyed. Kathy hadn't wanted to lose Ben. She hadn't wanted to lose everything. All she had wanted was to feel that thrill, that secret excitement with Roger, thinking it would be harmless, just a secret fling. But it had shattered her life in ways she never anticipated. In a moment of despair, she thought of Roger. Maybe he would help me. Maybe he can explain everything. She dialed his number, holding her breath and waiting for him to answer, but there was nothing, not even a beep. Confused, she tried again, but the same silence greeted her. It took Kathy a moment to realize what had happened. Roger had blocked her. She was cut off completely, just like that, disappearing into the shadows where their affair had thrived. Her heart sank deeper, and her chest tightened with an overwhelming sense of abandonment. Had she meant nothing to him at all? The hurt became too much, and rage boiled inside her. A bitter fury at the world, at herself, at everything. She leaped to her feet and kicked the nearest box, sending it flying across the room. She punched another one, spilling its contents across the floor. Clothes, books, trinkets from her life with Ben, all scattered like broken pieces of her soul. She screamed and kicked, letting out every bit of pain until her body ached and her breath came in ragged gasps. 20 minutes later, exhausted and hollow, she collapsed in the middle of the mess she had created. Tears streamed down her face as she gasped for air, feeling utterly lost. With shaky hands, she grabbed her phone again and dialed her uncle. He answered after the second ring, his voice stern and heavy. The silence between them was thick with tension, the memory of his cold stare at the restaurant still fresh in Kathy's mind. "Uncle, I need your help," she whispered, her voice cracking. Her uncle's tone was hard and unforgiving. "My girl, you made a big mistake. This is a shame to our family." Kathy choked back a sob, but her tears kept flowing. "Please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I need you." Her uncle's sigh came through the phone, heavy with disappointment. "I promised your father, Kathy. I promised him I'd look after you," her uncle said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "But you didn't just betray Ben. You betrayed all of us, your father, your family. You've put us all in a difficult place. I didn't mean to." Kathy sobbed, desperation cracking her voice. "I never wanted this." For a long moment, her uncle was silent. Then, with a deep sigh, his tone softened slightly. "Family doesn't abandon its own. I won't leave you, Kathy, but you need to understand. You will have to atone for this. It's not going to be easy, and things between us won't be the same. Not until you've made this right." Kathy's heart broke all over again, shame burning through her as his words sank in. But at least she wasn't completely alone. "Thank you, Uncle," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't thank me yet," he replied, his voice still firm. "There's a long road ahead, and you'll have to earn back our trust." The call ended, leaving Kathy with the sound of silence once again. She dropped the phone, her body limp and heavy with despair. She couldn't bring herself to move. All she could do was lie there, curled up on the cold floor as the darkness of the night swallowed her whole. Hours passed, but she didn't care. She stayed still and broken until the first light of morning crept through the window, casting pale shadows on the walls of the empty apartment. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I, 31 female, am married to James, 35 male, and we have a toddler son together. James also has 2 children, Grace, young female teen, and Luke, young male teen, with his ex-wife Sharon, 36. Sharon and James have been divorced for 12 years, and ever since, Sharon's been in a string of relationships and had 4 additional children who range in age from tween and under. She's currently married and has 3 stepchildren who are pre-tween and under. James has always been willing to help Sharon if needed, so the kids can see them getting along, and so they know he always does his best for them and their mom. But now he wants me to go a step further than he ever has, and he wants me to babysit all of Sharon's kids, since I'm a stay-at-home mom, technically, but I do run my own online business to earn money and can do that around everything else in my life. He said Sharon is struggling to find childcare for all of her children, and her husband is a bit of a deadbeat. I found out after that Grace asked her dad to help because she worried about her mom. I told James that was too much for me. He said he would help where he could, and I wouldn't need to worry about money because he would take care of it. I told him that's a lot though, and honestly, too overwhelming for me. He was frustrated with me, and I told him I didn't appreciate the pressure he was putting on me. Later, Sharon called me and told me she wanted to start dropping off the kids after Christmas. I told her I hadn't agreed. She told me James had told her I would do it. She then told me I should be willing to help out, and it would win the kids over, Grace and Luke, to me, and maybe even to my son, their half-brother. I told James he had no right to promise anything on my behalf. He told me he believed I would be on board, and he was surprised I was so against it when I never had a problem with him helping. Then he asked me to give a reason why I couldn't help with getting in someone to help me take care of the kids. I told him he could just pay for people then, if he's so determined, but I won't be babysitting. I also told him we need marriage counseling because of this. Also, this might be meaningless, but I feel I should confess it here. Another reason I'm unwilling, even if it wasn't so much hard work, is the fact that Grace and Luke have never shown an interest in my son, but they're half-siblings from their mom and step-siblings from her. It's totally different. I think it's because they consider all of them, even the steps, their mom's kids, but with my son, he's mine and not as much their dad's. They're not fond of me or their mom's husband. It's something I've been working on, but I admit the idea of having all the kids as my son gets a bit older and him watching his two siblings treat their other siblings so much better makes me say no anyway. Anyway, Sharon's calling me an idiot and saying that I'm not thinking of my stepkids. James thinks I should have been willing to work with him to figure out a compromise. Am I the idiot? I'm trying to do the math here. She has 6 biological kids, 2 with your hubby, and 4 with other men, and 3 stepchildren. So he wants you to watch 7 additional kids during the day? Not to mention your child, Grace and Luke? It's 10 kids in total? I'd say no for the sheer chaos that would cause. And also, you work. Stop calling yourself a stay-at-home mom. You work from home with a flexible schedule and keep reminding your husband of that. Yeah, you'd be watching 10 kids in total, right? What the heck? That's not a reasonable request. In an emergency situation for one day or evening, maybe, and only if you're up to it. But regular daycare doesn't even allow that many kids with one person. It would also bother me greatly that your husband goes that far to help his ex. I get he's probably doing this for the benefit of his kids, but this is taking it very far. You are not the idiot. His voluntolding you is a big problem in your marriage. Watching 10 kids along with your own while working from home is not feasible in any way, shape, or form. Be sure to tell both of them in text that if they drop the children off, you will call the police. Go to your support system, since James is not it. This is not a "can you watch my kid for me for a few hours?" It's a "can you set up and run a full-blown daycare for me for free?" And Jesus, can you imagine the cost of food too? I'm a guy, and I'm honestly going to tell you, your husband has agreed to this because he knows he won't be the one doing the main heavy lifting of all these kids, apart from throwing money at it. He will only do the bare minimum of anything with all the kids. I guarantee you. Are you sure your husband isn't sleeping with her? Because that's the only reason I can think of anyone would even propose this bizarre scenario. I, 40 male, have a daughter, Claire, teen, with my ex, Amy, 39 female. Amy and I broke up when Claire was born because she felt like we settled down too soon and felt shackled by our relationship and family. We've always shared 50-50 custody since. I got married to my now wife, Jane, 35, about 5 years ago. Amy went on to have 2 other kids with 2 different men who aren't involved with the kids, so she has full custody of her other 2 kids, then 50% of Claire. Her 2 youngest sons are a toddler and a preschooler. Claire doesn't love the situation in which she lives with her mom. The place is crowded, and her 2 younger brothers are just, well, toddlers. She says they don't leave her alone, and she gets no time alone there. So she prefers to stay with me more often now. She also gets along really well with my now wife and wants to spend a lot of time with her. Claire asked me if she could spend Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with me and Jane. Our regular schedule was that Claire spent Christmas Eve with one of us and Christmas Day with the other, and then we switched it around the next year. I told Claire that I couldn't give her an answer to that without discussing it with her mom. She asked her mom before I could discuss it with her, and Amy called to tell me it was okay and that Claire could spend both days with me because she had her hands full anyway, and it would take some work off her plate. I'm excited to have both days with Claire, and so is Jane. Jane actually suggested we go somewhere since we have both days to spend with Claire. So we planned a trip to a beach resort in another city. I called Amy to let her know, and she said it was fine, but she called me back 2 days later asking if there's any chance I could cancel the beach trip and do something in our city and also include her sons so that she can go and see her family this Christmas. She said her sons don't have passports, so she can't take them to another country with her to visit her family. But this is the only time she has to visit her family because she always has to work. I said I barely knew her kids, so it would be strange just to take them in and take care of them for however many days she's gone. I just want to relax with my wife and Claire, and taking care of 2 toddlers that I don't even know personally is not my idea of a good Christmas. That's so much pressure, and I haven't taken care of a toddler in about a decade. I also already told Claire about the beach trip, and she was so excited. So simply staying home isn't an option if it's not an emergency. I don't imagine she'll be too happy to have her brothers come along when she complains about being at her mom's house because of them either. I told Amy the reasons above, except that Claire didn't like being around her brothers, and she said that I'm doing this to punish her for leaving me, and that I could easily take care of her sons. But I'm being spiteful. I told her to stop being ridiculous. We broke up 14 years ago, and I found the love of my life after that. There's no reason on earth for me to be spiteful, and I'm sorry to decline her request. I'd rather just be with my immediate family this Christmas. She said she didn't think I was the type to alienate children out of spite, and she's disappointed in the man I've become. This is the first time since our breakup that we had an argument or anything close to it. She usually isn't like this, so while I think it's unreasonable for her to expect me to take care of her 2 sons while she's gone, I'm worried that I damaged our co-parenting relationship. If it wasn't Christmas, I really would have considered it. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. She's emotionally blackmailing you, so she doesn't have to take care of her kids. It sounds like Claire might move in with you full time. I bet Claire would love to. I wonder how many diapers Claire has had to change. Christmas is the same day every year. She had plenty of time to get passports for her kids. I'm not trying to defend her because she's out of line with the Christmas thing, but it is actually legitimately insanely hard to get your kid a passport if you don't have contact with the dad. Both parents have to physically show up to an appointment in person for both kids in order to get them a passport. So if she isn't in contact with the dads and doesn't have a way to reach them, assuming they're on the birth certificates, then getting the passport would be a serious issue. What if she doesn't come back? Sounds like a trap. Maybe my brain is going wild, but what if she never returned from this vacation? And also, what if she did return and started telling tales about how you mistreated the boys or something? This leaves you in a very vulnerable position in more ways than one. Before my cousin married her husband, she was one of those eat the rich, anti-capitalist people who blamed rich people for the world's problems, especially climate change. I love her, but she was annoying about the whole thing a lot of the time, and it was almost her entire personality. At one point, she hated rich people to the point that when she met her husband, she claimed he only wanted to date her because he wasn't used to not getting his way because he grew up rich, and she'd get angry whenever he did anything nice for her. Even when she married him, she claimed it was okay because she could give all of his money away if she did. They moved to Australia a few months ago, and they were supposed to stay there for 3 years minimum. But my cousin found out she was pregnant 2 weeks ago, and according to her husband, had a complete meltdown. She'd never lived away from her parents before, and she said she was already overwhelmed because her life has been changing so fast. So finding out she was pregnant was the final straw. Her husband is lovely, so he dropped everything, and they left Australia the very next day. He has to go back after the holidays to sort some things out, and it seems like they're going to have to be long distance for a while, since my cousin doesn't want to be so far from family. She told me he plans to fly back and forth while he sorted some things out. I pointed out how that would be bad for the environment, since she still acts super passionate about climate change. She claims they don't have another choice, which is very clearly a lie. I also told her she had become a hypocrite by marrying her husband since he was everything she stood against personified. And I think her pregnancy hormones got to her because she started crying when she normally wouldn't cry over something like this. I feel bad for making her cry, since that wasn't my intention. Am I the idiot? You are the idiot. It wasn't pregnancy hormones. You were just mean. One thing we learn in life is never say never, because life has a twisted humor. As people grow, their views and opinions change, and that's okay. It was a fair comment about the environment, because that's true. But is he taking a private jet? If not, and he's flying on a commercial plane, then it really doesn't have a big environmental impact anyway. Also, she's clearly going through something, so maybe bring this up jokingly at a later date, not seriously when she's having a life crisis. Even if it's not on a private jet, taking long-haul flights is still one of the major contributors to our carbon footprint. It's a smaller impact than flying private, obviously, but it's still big relative to the rest of our typical consumption. It sounds like Cousins' less eat the rich and more make the rich eat you. Mad props to her for playing the system. Yeah, it sounds like she wouldn't have had that perspective before the money. She just softens her views for herself. OP, not the idiot. You gave her a taste of her own medicine, and her judgmental butt didn't like it. She is the rich she hates now, who has the luxury of just flying back and forth, all because she had a tantrum about being pregnant and away from family. She's a complete hypocrite. My sister has a tween daughter. She's her affair partner's child. I knew the guy. He was really abusive. So my sister chose to hide it from him and pretended it was her husband's child. A few months ago, her husband found out that the child wasn't his and decided he didn't want to raise the child anymore and sent her to our parents' house. Our parents are very old and couldn't care for a kid, so they called me and asked me to take her. I wanted to take her in, but my wife was against it. We have a child of our own, and my wife felt we should concentrate on raising her rather than raising another child. I had no choice but to find her bio dad and ask him to take her. This happened a few months ago, and I still feel terrible. I haven't called or seen my niece since then. My parents think I'm an idiot for letting my wife kick my niece out, but it wasn't my responsibility, was it? Wait, where's your sister, the mother of the kid? Why are your parents blaming your wife instead of their daughter? Additionally, the biological father has parental rights. There are also a lot of legal details to sort through before you can consider taking a child in. If those issues can be overcome, I would ask, what is in the child's best interest? Yeah, my heart goes out to her too. She's being passed around like an unwanted bag of French fries. Does anyone love the child? If they're married and he signed the birth certificate, he's legally her father. Can someone call Child Protective Services on mom and legal dad for abandoning their kid? This poor kid. Mom, legal father, and bio father all sound like idiots. The grandparents aren't much better for blaming the OP instead of their daughter for this mess. You are not the idiot. The niece was not kicked out. You just chose not to accept the request to take in and raise someone else's child. That is perfectly fine. The real idiot is your sister. This is her child. Apparently, the ultimatum was her husband or her daughter, and she chose her husband, even if it meant sending her tween daughter to an abusive father whom she had never met. The niece did nothing wrong, and her world is turned upside down. Sister and husband are terrible. I could see the husband being upset, but to throw out a child that he raised as his own for that many years because of his pride is awful. The deal with my kids was that I would pay for basically all of their college if they got good grades, graduated on track for their degree, and held a campus job. I also made it clear that if they drop out, I will not pay for them to go back, even if I have the money. My son did great. My second oldest did great also. My third kid did not. She was struggling, so I got rid of the requirements of a campus job and let her focus on her grades. She failed and admitted to not attending class or doing the work. A lot of other factors went into it, but the plan is that she'll take a light semester next semester and live at home. I thought we had an agreement until today. She told me she got into another college and wants to go there. She would have to pay full price for this college. The one she's at the moment is a good college that has given her scholarships. The new one is a branch state school known to be a party school. It's also far away, so she can't live at home. So she'll be spending twice as much, won't be at home, and it's a party school. I told her it would be a waste of my money to send her to that school. She can go, but she'll need to take out loans, and my financial help ends. This started an argument about me controlling her life, and I'm a huge jerk. Her siblings also got involved and called me a jerk for holding the money, that I never did that to them, but they were responsible, and she isn't. She just proved that this year. Not the idiot, but I don't understand why you think her current school will continue to give her scholarships. I wouldn't say no, I'd say not yet. Tell her she has to succeed for a couple of semesters as a commuter before you reconsider other schools. You're not controlling her life, you're giving her a choice. She can stay nearby and have her tuition paid. She can go to the other college and pay for it herself. Your position is absolutely reasonable. She's already done poorly once, so why would you spend more of your money to send her to a party school far away with no way to help her be accountable? I don't know why, and maybe I'm being unfair, but I can picture your daughter at the college she wants, going to parties instead of classes, getting pregnant from a jerk or someone she doesn't know to contact after, and coming back home for you to financially support her and the baby. You're not the idiot. Unfortunately, you have a very immature, entitled, and irresponsible daughter.
The most painful thing was watching my wife prepare for an evening with her boss, Mark Diamond. She wore desirable clothes and spent a lot of time on makeup and hair, and put on a dress and high heels I'd never seen. I felt betrayed, jealous, and angry. She did all this for Mark, not me, while I worked hard to provide for our family. It was confusing. Our bed life was great, and Jessica was always attentive and open. After 20 years of marriage, I trusted her, except for that one night a month ago at her company's dinner when Mark paid too much attention to her. There was a smirk when he looked at me after dancing with my wife, giving me a hint. For some reason, a bad feeling bothered me, and it got worse when I told Jessica the next day. Her defense of Mark confirmed my suspicions. Late meetings and missed lunches suddenly became a red flag that I needed to address immediately. The more I thought, the angrier I became. Jessica is Mark's personal assistant, and Mark is the managing partner of a prestigious law firm. He loves flaunting his success with expensive cars, jewelry, and his young trophy wife, Stella. She was a 30-year-old, extremely desirable girl he exchanged for his ex-wife of 20 years. Mark likes making jokes at other people's expense, and I remember him making fun of my work on one of our walks. I sell screws and fasteners to large retail stores. It's not a glamorous job, but I made over $200,000 a year, providing a good living for my family. I gave Jessica everything she wanted and paid for our daughter Sarah's college education. She was now in her second year. We live in a pleasant community with good friends and a comfortable lifestyle. I wasn't a power broker and didn't make $1 million a year like Mark, but we were happy, or so I thought. The night he ridiculed my work in front of my wife and others stirred my anger. It wasn't just his arrogance that bothered me, but also the fact that my wife defended him after he humiliated me. Regarding the question about my work at Home Depot, he asked, "So, Johnny, how's it going with the nuts and bolts? It must be fun working at Home Depot every day." Upon witnessing Jessica's laughter, my blood boiled, prompting my silent departure. To her credit, Jessica approached me and inquired about the issue. Upon explaining, she attempted to downplay it. She remarked, "Oh, baby, he's just kidding. He loves to have fun. You shouldn't take everything so personally. Come with me. He's a really good guy." Against my better judgment, I stayed at dinner. Looking back, I realize I should have seen the signs, but now I may have missed some red flags. I'm not a fool, and I wouldn't sit quietly. I can understand why people are attracted to Mark. He's the alpha, the big, strong, good-looking man, the wealthy partner everyone wants to be around. Jessica was his closest ally at the firm. Everything was going well, despite his younger, handsome wife. For Mark, he wanted it all, including someone else's wife. Over the next week, I acted quickly to find out if I was crazy or if my intuition was correct. After 6 audio recording devices and 5 video cameras arrived, I began to implement my plan. The first camera went in the smoke detector in our bedroom. The next 2 captured different angles of the bedroom. The rest went in the master bathroom and living room. All cameras had live streaming and up to 8K recording, connecting wirelessly to a computer in the attic, controlled remotely via a phone app. The audio devices were unique, one in a pen next to the kitchen phone and the other discreetly in her car. Standard recording devices went in her 3 favorite purses and one behind our bed. With this setup, I should capture at least 90% of her conversations and activities in the house. I felt a sense of foreboding about the upcoming week as I prepared for a business trip. Jessica, as usual, showered me with love and made our time in bed unforgettable. Whenever I went on a trip, she would begin with lots of kisses and sweet talk, expressing her love and desire for me. Her closeness and love were something I cherished, and she never disappointed. She expressed, "I love you so much, and I love making love to you, honey." With tears in her eyes, she looked at me with a smile and said, "I love you too, baby. You are amazing, and I will love you forever." It was an incredible night, and I felt so close and in love with this woman that I was convinced she couldn't be unfaithful. I almost abandoned my plan to spy on her, but thankfully, I left everything as it was and embarked on my 2-night trip this week. I wanted to give her enough time in case something happened. We kissed goodbye, and by 6:00 p.m., I was on my way for the 3-hour drive to the hotel. The trip gave me time to reflect on the last 6 months of trying to find something else to do. Apart from 2 incidents with her boss, that smirk and his attempt to humiliate me, nothing changed. I smiled when I realized I was being foolish and paranoid. When I finally arrived at the hotel, I checked into my room, turned on my laptop, and relaxed on the king-size bed. It took a few minutes, and I checked my email for any work messages. Then I clicked on the link to the server in my attic to view the last 3 hours. I knew there wouldn't be much to see, but I needed to test the remote access system. I played the video at 3 times the speed until I saw my wife in the bedroom, then returned it to normal speed to enjoy watching my beautiful, desirable wife making a phone call. What I didn't expect was the phone conversation with Mark an hour after I left. The video camera captured the audio as I watched her lying on the bed talking to her boss. I could only hear her part of the conversation as I watched and listened to the videotape. She mentioned that I had left and she was all alone. She confirmed it would be 2 nights this time. They discussed when he could come, considering the risk of his wife asking about his whereabouts. She expressed excitement about the prospect and agreed to spend the night with him, expressing her desire to wake up next to him. After arranging the details, she reassured him that she was all his, and they exchanged words of affection. As I sat there in shock, I couldn't comprehend how we had just made passionate love. And now, an hour later, she was inviting him to spend the night. It left me questioning who this woman truly was. How could she profess love to me and betray me moments later? The unsettling question lingered. Is he coming tonight? For the next hour, I watched my loving wife prepare to meet her lover. Watching her shower, put on desirable lingerie, high heels, and makeup after spending 30 minutes fixing her hair was both painful and erotic. I always knew she was a passionate being, but she never dressed like that for me. Anger and jealousy consumed me as I realized she was doing it all for Mark, not her faithful husband. It was hard to believe. The question of whether Mark would come over tonight was soon answered when the doorbell rang. I observed Mark walking into my house and sharing a deep kiss with Jessica in real time, as captured by the video camera. I took a close-up of their kiss, an image that caused me to vomit for the first time that night. He complimented Jessica, remarking, "Wow, baby, you look amazing in that dress. I can't wait to rip it off your desirable body and make love to you all night long," with a wide smile directed at her. While their exchange fueled my anger, it transformed into unbearable pain when I witnessed her taking his hand and leading him into our bedroom. The pain intensified as I watched her undress him, revealing a man with a robust physique and six-pack abs. As I observed this scene, a mixture of jealousy, rage, and anger consumed me, yet a peculiar sense of admiration for their audacity emerged. After the second bout of vomiting, I endured listening to them engage in personal activities for the next hour. Realizing my marriage was over, I acknowledged that I shouldn't have allowed it to bother me, but their conversation proved to be the most painful part of the night. As they lay together, he initiated a dialogue. He mentioned my absence, noting that my husband was away for a few nights, making her all his for the next 2 days. She responded with enthusiasm, expressing her thrill that he could stay the night, and how she had wanted to wake up next to him for so long. She confirmed her affection, stating that she loved being with him. He continued with anticipation, expressing his excitement about having her over and over again all night, while her husband worked hard. In a moment of self-awareness, she remarked on the situation, calling it foolish. She reminded him to behave, stating that she loved her husband, and he was a good person. He questioned their affair, asking why she let him have closeness with her. He mentioned that they were both married, and they should just enjoy the time they had together. She agreed, saying it made sense. He confessed his feelings, stating that she gave him more love and affection than his wife or any other woman he had been with. For him, it was more than just closeness. He loved the way she made him feel, Jessica. This revelation caused deep hurt, as the love he spoke of was supposed to be exclusively for me. I continued to witness their interactions as they hugged, kissed, and talked. In another exchange, Mark asked if her husband satisfied her as much as he did. He acknowledged that her husband was a wonderful lover, but claimed that he was not like her. He asserted that she did things to him that he couldn't explain. Overwhelmed with sadness, hurt, and a profound sense of loss, I turned off the computer. Unable to endure this betrayal in my home and bed, I decided to stop listening. After grappling with anger for several hours and experiencing insomnia, I came to the realization that a future filled with pain and the pursuit of revenge awaited me. Upon returning home, everything appeared normal, filled with love and respect, as if nothing had transpired. Jessica greeted me with a big hug and lots of kisses, acting as though nothing had occurred during my absence. However, the love I had always felt for her had transformed into disgust, causing me to shudder at her kiss. Despite my inner turmoil, I played the role of an actor convincingly, striving to appear as normal as possible. I gathered all the recordings and videos, creating copies in the cloud for backup, and crafted an encrypted file on my computer. Over the next 2 weeks, I ensured that every moment Jessica spent with me was purposeful. I kept her busy, deliberately preventing any opportunity for quickies or late-night encounters. She even inquired about my next trip, a clear indication that they desired my absence. One morning, while she was driving to work, I overheard their conversation. "When will your husband leave town again?" "I'm not sure, but I'll find out. It's got to happen soon, baby." Aware of their intentions, I strategically planned a one-night trip to ensure he would come while I was away. The plan started taking shape that same evening as I watched a movie on TV. My cheating wife asked, "Darling, when is your next trip?" Attempting to control my anger, I responded in a joking voice, "Honey, are you trying to get rid of me?" Do you have a secret lover who comes when I'm not there? She maintained her composure, showing no signs of guilt. Do not be silly. I like it when you're home. I hope you don't have to leave, and I'm wondering if your travel has been cut back. No, sorry, honey. My job still requires me to travel. Yes, I have an evening appointment next Tuesday, and I'll be back sometime on Wednesday, I said in a convincing tone. I hate it when you leave. I wish you didn't have to travel like that. I miss you so much when you're gone. She then came over, hugged me, kissed me deeply, and made me feel more love than I can explain. Upon realizing that she was giving the same love to another man, I felt an intense urge to scream and throw her to the floor. However, I maintained my composure and continued to work as usual, knowing that my plan would be put into action the following week. On Tuesday, I packed up for the trip, and Jessica and I had our last session of lovemaking. She kissed me wonderfully before I left that night, and I wondered if she had seen the sadness in my eyes when I looked at her one last time. I noticed her expression change, but I wasn't sure what she was thinking. Instead of leaving town, I returned to my office and parked my car. I then went back to my desk to work late, which was not unusual, and the few people who were there never questioned my arrival. At approximately 7:30, the video camera turned on as Mark entered my house and tenderly kissed my soon-to-be ex-wife. Again. It was showtime. I used a phone app to turn off the video camera, stashed my cell phone in a drawer to avoid GPS tracking. Leaving the office quietly, I grabbed my folding electric bike from the car trunk. The electric motor allowed speeds up to 30 mph, covering 50 miles on a single charge. Wearing a black hoodie, I made sure no one noticed and silently biked the 12-mile journey back home. The idea behind the bike was stealth, enabling me to return home quietly and unnoticed. Within 20 minutes, I parked the bike behind the house, entered through the open backsliding door I left, and stood quietly to ensure I wasn't discovered. Listening for sounds from the bedroom, I confirmed they were occupied and my arrival wasn't known. I fetched a short-barreled rifle and an aluminum bat from the closet, placing the rifle outside the bedroom and holding the bat. Quietly opening the door to the candlelit room, their noise covered my approach. Without hesitation, I walked to the bed and delivered a strong blow to the side of his head. The dull thud of metal hitting flesh was overshadowed by the 250-pound man hitting the floor. Grabbing the rifle and turning on the light, Jessica realized what was happening. Looks like stunned and in shock, she screamed, "Oh God, no! Please, no! This can't be true! Why are you here? You should be away! Why are you with another man in my bed?" That's a better question. Now shut up and pay attention. The big man, semi-conscious, sat against the wall with blood dripping from a 6-inch wound caused by a metal bat. Watching him regain consciousness, I pointed the rifle at him. "Damn it, this hurts! Why did you do that, dude? Are you kidding? You have closeness with my wife in my bed, and you think I won't react? What are you going to do?" He nervously looked at the rifle I was pointing. "Are you worried, big man? Are you afraid I will hurt you? I know what you two did behind my back, and today is payback. I'm gonna do away with you, Mark. Tonight you will die." Teasingly, I continued, "Everything you worked for will disappear. I hope it was worth it, prick. Dude, if you do away with me, you're going to jail for the rest of your life. To hell with this. We will all die tonight. How does that sound?" Idiot. I wanted to put the fear of God into both of them, with no plans to do away with. Their fear excited me. Jessica was crying, curled up, trying to cover herself. "Baby, please don't do anything stupid. I love you, I really do. Put the rifle down and let's talk about this." With an evil grin, I pointed the rifle at her. "Shut up. This is because you wanted adventures outside of our marriage. Whatever happens tonight is all your work. They knew they were in trouble and had to calm me down, or I would injure everyone. The rifle had custom-made loads with 25% salt and 75% capsicum oleoresin, pepper spray. I aimed to cause pain, maybe damage, not to do away with. Though I had no intention of going to jail, I wanted to seriously scare them, making the emotions last. After Big Mark recovered, he tried to rush at me, and I unloaded the first round. The explosion was loud, his screams louder. A few minutes later, as he sat writhing in pain, bleeding, I explained the plan. Kicking him to get his attention, I looked at my soon-to-be ex-wife. "Listen to me, and you too, my cheating wife. I'll leave in a few minutes, and you take this loser to the emergency room before he bleeds out. You won't call special services. You'll take him to the hospital in your car. You won't tell anyone how this happened or that I was involved. If any of you say I was involved or knew about your infidelity, the collected video, audio, and photos will go public. Don't fire my ex-wife. She'll need her job after the divorce. If you come after me or she refuses the divorce proposal, everything comes out. Get him to the hospital before he bleeds. And remember what I said." I left the same way I came, fixing the lock and closing the door. I put the bat and rifle in a bag, slung it over my shoulder. Quietly leaving the area, I threw the bat and rifle into different parts of the river while riding my bike back to the office. I removed the surgical gloves and threw them away upon returning to the office. I stored my bike in the car and returned to my desk by 9 a.m. After that, I set off on my trip, bidding farewell to some IT co-workers burning the midnight oil. To everyone's knowledge, my car never left the parking lot, and I stayed at my desk all evening. Accusations would be their word against mine with no proof if they ever pointed fingers. Mark had surgery. He had to shave his head for 18 stitches due to a concussion. According to his story, he last remembered walking home with paperwork to his personal assistant before ending up in the hospital. He told the police he couldn't recall seeing anyone or being damaged, choosing to stay silent, aware that I could injure his life and career. Jessica was extremely upset and didn't utter a word about the incident. All she mentioned was hearing a shot. When she went outside, she found Mark lying there, and she rushed him to the hospital, thinking there wasn't time to wait for an ambulance. Neither could explain why he was undressed, and both stuck to their stories. Mark's wife doubted him, causing significant problems. I spent the afternoon removing surveillance equipment, uploading everything to an encrypted cloud server and tossing the equipment away. Any remaining evidence of their affair was now inaccessible in the cloud. Around 6 p.m., Jessica entered and found me in the living room with a bottle of my good whiskey. I sat quietly as she faced me on the couch. She looked shattered and sad. I had never seen her like this, and for a brief moment I felt sorry for her. With tears in her eyes, she couldn't bear it and tried to explain everything. "Johnny, what you witnessed was bad, but you need to know I wasn't in love with him. I know it seemed that way, and it must have hurt. But you know me. After closeness, I need connection. It was all for you, baby. When you left, I hated being alone, and Mark kept me company. And yes, it got passionate, but it was just closeness. You have to believe me." My mouth hung open in amazement at the incomprehensible excuse she made. "Jessica, I heard your explanations, and despite you saying those words of love were meant for me, I can't help but believe they were for Mark. It's over, Jessica. 20 wonderful years wasted because of your boss and your infidelity. We both have to live with your actions forever. Thanks for the pain and suffering you caused me. I'll always cherish it," I said sarcastically. "What do we do now?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Well, we're finished with you. I'll never understand how you did this to me or why I'll have to live with it forever. There's no way I can forgive what you did, but I'll keep my promise and not expose your infidelity. Sarah and your parents will never know they have such a woman instead of a mother and daughter. You'll have to explain why we're getting a divorce, but I warn you, don't make me the villain. If you do, it will end badly because I'll make sure everyone knows you're nothing more than a cheating adulteress. I'm putting the house up for sale, and in the meantime, you need to find a place to stay. Since you ruined everything, you need to move out. I'm not asking. This is what you'll do. Let me know where to send the divorce papers. Sign the papers and don't resist the divorce. Otherwise, it will be painful for you and your boyfriend. Crying into her hands, she tried to speak. He's not my boyfriend, and I don't love him. Can't we figure this out? Is there anything we can do? I know it's too late after what I did, but I can't live without you. And I'll do anything to keep us together. I never wanted to lose you. Please don't leave me. Jessica, if it had only been about closeness, we might have had a chance to mend things through counseling or separation. But what really ended my love for you was that you shared a love with him that was supposed to be just for me. The words you spoke to him destroyed us and everything I felt for you. No, I'll never forget or forgive your betrayal. I never want to see or talk to you again. After the divorce is finalized, you'll vanish from my life forever. After hours of pleading for forgiveness, she left the next morning, staying with her parents until the house was sold. During the following week, the police interrogated me, trying to make me admit involvement. I hired a lawyer, informing them that without evidence, I wouldn't answer questions without a warrant. With no proof and an alibi, they left me alone. The incident was eventually reported as a random burglary and assault. Jessica and her family called, begging me to reconsider. I was told she loves me, can't live without me, and is sorry. They urged counseling, but I stopped answering calls, changed my number, and cut all ties. Yes, the loss was devastating. Every second of separation was painful, but I couldn't come to terms with her betrayal. Jessica, a 42-year-old single mother, lived on her salary in a one-bedroom apartment. The pleasant life she once enjoyed was gone. Her daughter and family blamed her for the failed marriage. Now alone, Mark was more focused on saving his own marriage. Treated poorly at work, Jessica was blamed for Mark's physical and marital problems. Unable to work together, she was transferred to an administrative role with the same pay. Her new job was dull, and she lost her prestigious position working with one of the partners. News spread that she was one of Mark's ex-girlfriends, and she was treated accordingly. With a job she despised, no prospects for promotion, no friends, no husband, and a family blaming her for the divorce, she sank into depression. She cried every night, missing Johnny intensely. Her heart ached constantly, and thoughts of her actions haunted her. Sarah tried to help, but it seemed irreversible. Jessica neglected herself, eating poorly and drinking heavily, claiming without Johnny, she had no reason to worry. When Sarah sought advice from her father, he sympathized, but never reconciled. Stella orchestrated Mark's misery, making him pay for his infidelity. She dated younger men, keeping Mark around to cover expenses. Although they appeared together at events, they led separate lives. Mark would never have closeness again and would never find love for the rest of his life. He'd always remember when his life changed due to his desire for someone else's wife. He was incredibly angry with me and wanted to injure me in the worst way possible. However, nothing happened for months. Later that year, I was having a drink with my colleagues when I was attacked and battered outside the bar. My friends came to help, but the attackers left before the police arrived. I spent 2 days in the hospital with broken ribs and 20 stitches. I believed they intended to do away with me, and if it weren't for my friends, they might have succeeded. I knew it was revenge for Mark, and I wasn't surprised at all. 6 weeks later, feeling much better, I called Mark's office. "Mr. Diamond, please," I told his secretary. "Sorry, he's at a meeting. Can I take a message?" "Yes. Tell him to meet me at 01 Cocog this Friday at the French Deli across the street." "I'm sorry, sir. I don't schedule appointments with Mr. Diamond. Just leave a message. Write it down. Friday, 01 p.m. French Deli. Be there alone, Johnny. Just give it to him and he'll understand what it means. Thank you." Seated at a table facing the door, I waited for Johnny. When he walked in alone, I motioned for him to sit. "What do you want?" he asked. Ignoring his outburst, I said, "Thank you for coming. Your people did a good job, but they didn't follow through because you ignored my warning. You forced me to act." Handing him a folded paper, I said, Here's a link to a website created just for you. It operates from Syria with backup servers. It's untraceable. You're screwed. Check it out when you get back to your office." I omitted Jessica's face. She shouldn't pay for your sins. After viewing the site, think about how your life will change. His anger grew. "You've already ruined my life. Just stop it or we'll vanish. That's why we're here. I want to end this. You took away the most precious thing in my life, my wife. You ruined our 20-year marriage and I can't let you go free. I risk being destroyed, but I'll avenge the thrashing your people gave me." "Okay, calm down. What do you want?" "Two things that are not subject to discussion. You will stop any retaliation against me or anyone I know, including Jessica. You will deposit $1 million into this account by the end of the day on Friday. If the funds are not in the account by 9:00 p.m. on Friday, I will take action. So this paltry amount I'm asking should be considered a gift. If I agree, how do I know that you still won't destroy me? I'm a man of my word. Trust me. I will say this. If you don't do this, then there is a 100% chance that this site will become famous by Saturday morning. I hope you suffer for the rest of your life for what you did to my happy marriage." The money was transferred. We sold the house and divided the property. Jessica had enough money to live a comfortable life if she continued to work or found another husband. Mark kept her working as part of our deal, but they were never close again. Jessica never remarried, rarely dated, and lived with the pain she caused both men. She had lost her marriage and the love of the man she wanted to be with for the rest of her life, and now found herself alone and depressed. She died before her 50th birthday, a broken, sad woman. Only her daughter Sarah was present at the ceremony to scatter the ashes. Johnny continued to work for several more years and retired to a small town on the ocean. He married a nice woman who liked him mentally, but he could never replace the special love that only Jessica could give him. He never spoke to her again, and only heard about her from Sarah, whom he adored. They talked every day and remained close. But Sarah rarely mentioned her mother because she knew her father still loved her and did not want to awaken his pain. Jessica's passing away saddened him, but it also brought final relief to the deep sadness he had kept locked away.
My husband and I first met when we were both 22 years old at his best friend's wedding. I instantly fell in love with him, and it seemed like he had some interest in me as well. The day after the wedding, we had our first date in the park, and our relationship quickly became intense. Felix was everything I ever wanted in a partner. Smart, kind, good-looking, caring, strong, and fair. He was always there for me when I needed support, comforted me during tough times, and helped with my problems. He wasn't just my rock, he was my ideal man, and I loved him completely. After a year, we decided to move in together, and a year later, we got married. However, our marriage had its share of challenges. My husband was hardworking and shared household chores with me, but financial issues began to strain our young family, leading to occasional conflicts. During one of our fights, I left home for 2 weeks. Felix, who usually avoided confrontation, was slow to make amends, and my pride stopped me from reaching out first. I waited for him to make the first move. During that time, Felix's best friend Daima, who was also my friend, offered support when he saw how troubled I was. Our conversations turned passionate, leading to a night we spent together. I saw it as payback for Felix's indifference. But just 3 days later, Felix came to me with roses, apologized, and begged for my return. I realized my mistake, but it was too late. We reconciled, and things got better. Then, I discovered I was pregnant, and to my shock, the child was not Felix's, but Daima's. I struggled with this revelation, but it was too late. So, the choice of whether to have the child or not was out of my hands. I gave birth to my son 6 months later, and I cried every night, regretting my foolishness and losing the love of my life. I knew I had to confess, but I couldn't bear to break Felix's heart. Throughout my pregnancy, he was overjoyed, proudly telling everyone about his beloved wife giving him a son. His emotional moment at the maternity hospital, holding our child and calling him my son, my joy, my daddy's pride, is etched in my memory. I had planned to tell him the truth when our son was older, but that moment never came, and I continued to lie. 14 years passed, and our family seemed harmonious. I buried my deceit because being a father means more than just biological ties. But, as they say, secrets have a way of coming to light. One day, Felix found the unsent letters I had written to Daima. When I came home, he was standing in the dark, holding those letters. It shattered my soul. He said nothing, and his eyes held no emotion. I cried, begged for forgiveness, and tried to explain, but he remained silent. In that silence, I realized the depth of my wrongdoing and was ready to face any consequences. Felix just moved away from the window, sat on the couch, and cried. Seeing this, I lost control and became hysterical, sobbing uncontrollably. He left without a word, and I kept crying, realizing I had destroyed his life. My husband and I are both 38 years old, and our son Tom was at the center of our world. We had hoped for another child, but my health issues prevented it. Felix had dedicated his life to raising his best friend's child, his pride, and now he knows it's all a lie. That night, all I could think of was my terrible mistake. I wanted to die, but my love for our son stopped me. The next morning, Felix packed his things and left, ignoring my pleas to stay. It's been 2 months, and I'm still searching for a chance to beg for his forgiveness. I may be a fool, but I believe I have a chance because Felix hasn't filed for divorce and still communicates with our son. Daima only found out he was the father a year after the birth. I thought it wouldn't affect him, but to my surprise, he developed paternal feelings. He offered to raise our child because he and his wife had none, but I refused, as I loved only Felix. Tom felt only friendly sympathy for his biological father, and I didn't want to disrupt his family. I begged Daima not to interfere, emphasizing my love for my husband, our son, and our family. Daima sent money as unofficial child support, but I refused. Eventually, he walked out of our lives, though he and Felix remained friends until the truth came out. As for the letters, I kept them out of sentimentality, but it ultimately cost me my family. My husband has always been a great man. After our first big fight, I made a foolish decision to stay with my brother for 2 weeks. We had a good, friendly relationship. After the argument with Felix, we often talked on the phone. He tried to calm me down and convince me to return to my husband. But I was waiting for Felix to reach out, not his friend, and he stayed silent. One evening, when my brother was out, Daima called and offered to come over, saying that these things happen in many families at first, and I needed a distraction. I agreed, and without much thought, he came over. And then today, my son came home after spending the weekend with his father and mentioned they discussed the future of our family. I've been anxious all day, wondering what Felix told his son. If he's willing to come back, he wouldn't lie to our child. Except for that one time, I haven't cheated on my husband in our 16 years together. It was my only mistake. My son doesn't know who his real father is, and hopefully he never will. He deeply loves Felix, trusts him, and is proud to have him as a father. Their bond is even stronger than the one he shares with me. If he found out the truth now, it would break his heart. In any case, a lot has changed this week. Last weekend, my son talked to Felix about the future of our family. Felix didn't give a definite answer, but didn't rule out the possibility of us reuniting. On Tuesday, I asked my husband out for a date at a restaurant, and to my surprise, Felix agreed, boosting my confidence for a positive outcome. We didn't stay at the restaurant for long, choosing a long 4-hour walk in the park. During our time together, we reminisced about our past and our love, smoothly transitioning to discussing our future. I pleaded with my husband to return to the family, and though he didn't say it outright, it was clear he wanted the same. That night, I purposely sent my son to spend the night at a friend's house, freeing the apartment for my beloved to join me. We spent the night together, just like in the old days. The next morning, our conversation was brief as we rushed to work. In the evening, as my son and I were having dinner, Felix unexpectedly arrived with his belongings. Words can't express the joy in that moment. and my son was thrilled to see his father. I wonder if Felix has truly forgiven me. My biggest fear is that after living with me for a while, he might decide he no longer wants this family. But I love him deeply, and I know I betrayed him. I'm willing to do anything to make amends. Since his return, my husband hasn't brought up the issue of paternity, and though he acknowledges what happened, he doesn't show anger or negativity toward me. Crucially, his relationship with Tom remains unaffected, which was a major concern for me. Last night, we talked about our son's future, and we both agreed that he would likely move out in a few years. Felix expressed his joy at being a father, and it got us thinking about having another child. I plan to see a doctor soon, and my husband was genuinely excited about the idea. It's been over a month since my last message. I've started treatment, and my beloved has been supportive throughout, not dwelling on the past. According to the doctors, I have a good chance of conceiving and having a child after the treatment. The process is expensive and time-consuming, but my husband and I are ready to face any challenges for our happiness. In retrospect, I recognize the enormity of my mistake, but time cannot be rewound. I must take responsibility and live with the consequences of my actions. Things have taken a different turn in the family of my child's biological father. Felix and Daima haven't communicated for months, and I thought it was the end of their story. However, I was wrong. Daima's wife found out that he had a child with me, and her pain and frustration are indescribable. She feels the same betrayal my husband experienced a few months ago, betrayed by her beloved husband and her best friend. We had one conversation, if you can call it that, with her yelling, crying, and even slapping me a few times. Since then, we haven't spoken, and I haven't attempted to contact her. I understand that she will never forgive me. I had hoped she would come to her senses and give her husband another chance. However, last week, she filed for divorce and kicked Daima out of the house. What pains me the most in this story are their two young daughters, aged 12 and 5, and now their family is shattered because of my fault, my mistakes. 6 people have suffered because of me. My beloved husband, who dedicated his whole life to his family. My son, who will never know that his beloved father, whom he idolizes, is not his biological father. My best friend, who lost her marriage because of me and is now left alone with 2 children. Her 2 little daughters, who lost their favorite daddy, and Dima himself. He lost the most in this story, a friend with whom they had been inseparable for more than 15 years. His wife, who now doesn't want to see him. His daughters, whom Nasty doesn't even allow to talk to their father, and convinces them that he is a traitor, his apartment, which he worked hard for, and which will now be taken by his ex-wife. All this suffering, all this pain, it's all my fault. I don't know if I have the right to have children at all. Why did my lover forgive me? Why? If I were in his shoes, I wouldn't even look at me. I started therapy so we could have a child of our own, but it didn't work out. In the end, we decided it's not worth it. These treatments are costly and unlikely to succeed. My husband initially reacted normally, or so it seemed, but later I realized how much pain he was in. The worst thing happened at the end of the summer. It was exactly what I had feared. Our son discovered the truth, a day I'll never forget. I wish I could forget, but I can't. I genuinely believed I could shield my child from the consequences of my wrongdoing. I hoped and prayed, but it was all in vain. When Tom learned the truth, something within him broke. He transformed from a sweet, kind boy, dearly loved and caring towards his family, into a different person within days. For nearly 4 months now, we've been living through a nightmare. My son has started drinking, smoking, staying out late at night, and we have no idea where he goes the rest of the time. He's made some unsettling friends, and just the sight of them gives me the creeps. Rough-looking kids with a bad reputation throughout the neighborhood. The police know me well, but they've done nothing. It's a family issue. Deal with it. We've got more important matters to attend to. That's all we hear. My son also hates Felix now, even though they were close before. What did he say to his father? I understand that he's just a child suffering due to my mistakes, but my husband didn't deserve this. He endured so much when the truth about Tom came out, and then we had to give up having a child of our own. And now, this living hell. A month ago, Felix started experiencing heart problems. He was hospitalized with symptoms resembling a heart attack. Thankfully, it wasn't a heart attack, but he's on medication and might need surgery down the road. The doctors have warned him to avoid stress, but my son seizes every opportunity to provoke him. I try to intervene, but my husband sees me as being helpless. I witness his pain and resentment daily. He spends days in bed in silence. I've told him that depression could break his heart, but he doesn't listen. We're only 39 years old, yet in this time, he's aged visibly, looking 50 and constantly appearing sad. I have developed wrinkles and deep bags under my eyes. I'm living in a hell of my own making. Every day, I berate myself for my mistake, my betrayal, and pray for peace and harmony in our family. But I no longer believe in that, not in God, not in a happy ending for us. Now I realize how foolish I was to think I could escape the consequences of my actions. I carry the weight of ruining the lives of 6 people, and it's a heavy burden on my conscience. Daima, on the other hand, has it even worse. Nasty divorced him and took him to court over their property, leaving him homeless. She's spiraled into a life of partying, drinking, and changing partners weekly, unable to recover from the betrayal of her husband and me, her best friend, almost like a sister. I've tried to talk to her several times, but she becomes hysterical upon seeing me, leading to heated arguments. She's always been morally weak, and I shattered her. Their daughters now live with Nasty in a one-room apartment to avoid her different partners. I haven't heard from Dima for 6 months since their divorce. Total silence. December 31st should be a time of happiness, joy, and celebration, but not for me. My husband went to visit his parents in another city, and as for Tom, I have no idea where he is. He doesn't answer his phone. I've lost all my friends. Our family has been shunned since everything came to light, and it feels as if we're treated like outcasts. I sit at the table with a bottle, crying, not out of joy, but out of loneliness. This story took place last year when my husband and I were on vacation in Croatia. On the first day, at lunch, we met a married couple, but their origin isn't that important. They had been there for 2 days already, making them experienced compared to us. Ron and Molly were passionate about scuba diving, just like my husband, Stephen. We spent most of our time together, sharing meals, diving, shopping, and attending various evening events. The only time we didn't meet was at breakfast because Molly was a late riser, and I didn't mind spending the morning on my own. But as I tend to get bored quickly, I'd head to the beach in the morning or later in the evening when it was cooler. During breakfast, we sat with different neighbors, usually 2 younger guys. Although I hadn't paid much attention to them, one spoke English well with a slight accent, while the other remained quiet and smiled. I pondered for a while about their origin, considering various possibilities, but eventually settling on them being Swedes or Germans. I was curious to see if I was right, but it felt somewhat awkward to ask. Our interactions were limited to exchanging greetings and wishing each other a good meal. We followed a routine during our vacation, one that we hardly deviated from. In the mornings, Molly and Ron would head to the beach. Later, when it got hot, we'd either return to our rooms or explore the city once the weather cooled down. Diving was part of the plan, then back to the beach until almost sunset, and finally, visiting a bar or cafe for some dancing in the evenings. In contrast to them, I didn't take up scuba diving, despite my husband's attempts to get me interested. I had a fear of diving to significant depths, where panic would set in, and I worried about running out of air. I couldn't conquer this fear, and my husband eventually went diving without me. Instead, I'd stay on the boat, swim around it, or sunbathe on the deck. After a few days of this, I got tired and began spending time at the hotel pool, swimming or relaxing by the poolside with magazines as my companions. One day, I was at the pool, either refreshing myself or reading a magazine when, suddenly, right by my ear, a voice greeted me with, "Good afternoon." Even though it wasn't spoken loudly, I was startled, and the magazine slipped from my hands. I instantly recognized the voice with its distinctive accent, hard to forget. Turning towards the voice, I saw my breakfast neighbor, standing there with a smile. However, my disapproving expression wiped the smile from his face, and he began apologizing, explaining that he didn't mean to startle me and asking for forgiveness. I remained silent and resumed reading my magazine, though my heart was still racing from the scare. He apologized once more and walked away. After a few minutes, I managed to calm down. Unexpectedly, He returned, offering another apology and explaining that he didn't intend to frighten me. He asked if he could buy me a drink, and despite my initial hesitation, I accepted the glass of wine he offered. It was cool and tasted good. He continued apologizing and then started a conversation. I learned more about him. His name was Troy. He was German, and he and his parents had lived on the island in the past before relocating to Germany in the 90s. He was on vacation with his friend Kurt, who understood a little English but didn't speak it. Our conversation flowed naturally, and I began to feel sorry for him. The following day, he returned, and by the third day, I found myself eagerly looking forward to his presence. He became a regular visitor, and we developed a strong connection. Our conversation spanned various topics, with no topics off-limits. We simply enjoyed our relaxed and pleasant discussions. Our stay at the resort continued, and we grew accustomed to each other's company. I valued our interactions, and he left a positive impression on me, and over time, I even started to like him. Our discussions covered a wide range of subjects, and there seemed to be no subjects we couldn't explore. It felt effortless and enjoyable. As our vacation progressed, we crossed the equator, and it was on Molly's birthday that our vacation routine shifted. On that day, Stephen and I, along with Ron and Molly, spent half the day searching for a birthday gift. In the evening, they invited us to a cafe for a light dinner and dancing. The husbands enjoyed whiskey, while Molly and I indulged in the local red wine, which was light and delightful to the taste, and surprisingly easy to drink. The wine had little to no taste, and we both had a fair amount. My head felt light, and I didn't even notice the intoxication. Molly and I had a wonderful time on the dance floor, while Stephen and Ron took a break and sat at a table, engrossed in their conversation. Molly and I would occasionally return to the table to catch our breath and quench our thirst. The atmosphere was delightful. The drink I had consumed was starting to take its effect. While we were at the table, I spotted Troy near the bar. He noticed me and waved. I mechanically waved back, and to my surprise, he made his way towards us. Troy asked my husband, "May I invite your wife to dance?" Stephen momentarily turned his attention away from his conversation with Ron and nodded in agreement. We started with a couple of quick dances, followed by a slow one. Troy put his arm around my waist, and I wrapped my arms around his shoulders, swaying together to the music. He whispered in my ear, and I let out a chuckle. When the music ended, we returned to our table. Surprisingly, Molly also seemed tired of the men's conversation, so she invited Troy to join us. To my amazement, he accepted the invitation. Upon discovering that it was Troy's birthday, he raised a toast to the birthday girl. After a while, the three of us, Molly, Troy, and I, headed back to the dance floor. When the music slowed down, Troy asked me to dance once more. After the dance, we returned to our table, had more drinks, took a short break, and I suggested that we all go dancing. Both Stephen and Ron declined, and so did Molly. Troy and I returned to the dance floor, and when it was a slow dance, his hand glided gently on my hips as we swayed. "Troy," I said. "What?" He pretended not to understand. "Your hand," I replied. "Sorry," he excused himself. "It's kind of automatic." After a while it happened again, and though he once more naively excused himself, it somehow continued to happen. He did it on purpose. Then his hand went down again and again. I stopped telling him, and even though his touch was pleasing to me, I just began to return his hand to my waist myself. At the next slow dance, it was all over again, and at some point, I got tired of taking his hand away. I just stopped paying attention. It was dimly lit on the dance floor, and no one was paying attention to us, and it was a long way to our table, with other dancers blocking the view. He began lightly caressing me. His touch felt nice, but there was still a limit. "Troy, come on, are you uncomfortable?" His question just stunned me. I thought he was going to make excuses, and I couldn't even find a way to answer him. He pulled me closer and began whispering in my ear. "You're so beautiful. I like you so much. When I saw you, the compliments just kept coming." His words were incoherent but exciting. My mind was a whirlwind, a mix of his words, the drinks, and the haze in my head. "Stop it, please." The compliments kept flowing. Suddenly, he stopped talking and started kissing me. My ear, my hair, my neck. A pleasant shiver ran through my body. And then I felt his actions become more active. "God, what is he doing? Has he gone crazy? Stop it!" I wasn't asking him, I was begging him. Don't! I was trembling with desire or fear or both. He took my arm and pulled me with him. I followed him as if I were in a trance, like I was in a fog. He was practically dragging me somewhere. Finally, we stopped, my back pressed against something, and he started kissing me again. I couldn't comprehend where I was or who I was with. The kisses covered my face, my hair, my neck. I was shivering all over. He found my lips and kissed them deeply. My skin was covered in goosebumps, and my desire grew. Troy's kiss stopped, and I could feel the warmth of his face and the unevenness of his breaths. Shivers ran through me, and the surroundings seemed hazy as I drifted into a mental fog. We navigated through some bushes and entered an alley. The cafe was just a few steps away, and my anticipation was building. Everything had unfolded beyond the cafe's walls, and we could have been seen. This thought sent a thrill through me, alternating between warmth and a shiver down my spine. Within minutes, we reached the entrance to the dance floor of the cafe. Leaning in, Troy whispered, "You're amazing. When my husband falls asleep, come over," and handed me his number. Still in a daze, I made my way to the bathroom. I splashed water on my face, trying to regain my composure. The cool water brought me back to reality. I realized that I was a married woman who had just betrayed her husband with a complete stranger. Returning to my husband and friends, a creeping fear intensified with every step. I felt a chill inside, my cheeks flushed, and it seemed as if I no longer had control over myself. Surprisingly, no one questioned my absence. I slumped into my chair and poured a full glass of wine. I sipped it slowly, attempting to hide any signs of what had occurred. Despite my efforts, Stephen noticed my detachment and asked, "Katie, are you okay?" I nodded silently. "Should we go home?" I nodded again. I was in a strange state of turmoil. On one hand, everything that had transpired thrilled me, but at the same time, I couldn't relax, fearing that we might be discovered. Stephen was unsteady on his feet, having had his share of drinks during the evening. That didn't concern me at all. I was looking forward to the night ahead, hoping I wouldn't have to go through such encounters with strangers in my life again.
I, 66 female, have 2 children, Benjamin, 36 male, and Jack, 33 male. Jack is in a good place in his life. He has a good job with a senior position in his industry, a long-term fiancé, and a wide circle of friends. And while they're still renting, they're both currently saving for a house deposit. Benji, on the other hand, despite being the oldest, has not done as well in life. Benji's never had a girlfriend or a boyfriend, has no friends that he visits. He didn't give university a try, but left both times in his first year due to anxiety. Today he chooses not to work. Benji and I have been living alone for the last 6 years, and I support him financially. I know that the situation is not ideal. However, I've long since come to terms with the fact that Benji's a square peg trying to fit in a world of round holes. And as I'm getting older, I'm happy for his company. It's an arrangement that suits us both. I'm starting to get on in years, and recently my thoughts have turned to my children and what they'll do after I'm gone. I decided to update my will a few months ago and asked Jack for a meeting to address the changes. I let him know that in my updated will, almost all of my assets, both cash and property, will be going to Benji. However, I'll be giving him a cash amount to help with his house deposit, £10,000. My reasoning for this is that I know full well Jack can look after himself after I'm gone, but Benji will always struggle without assistance. He's simply never going to have what Jack has. Jack did not take the news kindly. He says I'm effectively punishing him for succeeding in life, whereas his brother has been allowed not to try and fail his entire life and is now being rewarded for choosing to remain an infant so he can suckle on mommy's breast. He said some more unkind things about his brother, and at that stage, I said it was better that he leave until he could calm himself down. On the way out the door, he told me that this was not about money or assets, but was yet another instance of me favoring and coddling Benji the way I've done his entire life. Not true. And claimed we were in an emotionally enmeshment relationship. I told him to get out. This all went down 3 months ago, and since then, Jack will no longer accept my calls. He ignored my 66th birthday outright, not even a card, and at this stage, I'm not expecting to see him at all for Christmas, so it'll just be Benji and me as usual. Other family members have since become aware of the drama and are telling me that my decision is wrong and that by doing this, I'm driving a wedge further between Jack and Benji when their relationship is already strained. Am I the idiot for my decision? I love both my children equally, but I can't go to my grave knowing that Benji will be out on the streets suffering without me. I know that Jack will never have to struggle like Benji, so I don't even know why he even needs the money in the first place. I'm frankly disgusted by his greed and lack of concern for his brother's future. You are the idiot. Complete idiot. You can't give one child more because the other becomes self-sufficient. You picked a favorite. That's how your son Jack feels. You've likely lost Jack, but you don't care, do you? As long as you have Benji. What makes you think Benji will make good choices after you pass just because you gave him everything? Furthermore, once he's finished making all the wrong decisions that mommy's money will allow and has nothing left, what happens to him then? If OP's concern is really Benji's long-term well-being, right now in the will, she divides the whole estate equally, including the sale money from the house. After all, it is far too big for OP's favorite son to stay in it alone and put Benji's share of the money into a trust managed jointly by a lawyer and Jack. Also, OP is 66, not 95. Benji's 36. He should be made to get a job, earn an income, and pay rent and bills. I doubt OP's estate, even if it's all given unfairly to Benji, would be enough to support both OP and Benji for the next 25 to 30 years, plus Benji on his own for another 30 years after that. I'm betting OP isn't going to change the will, and it's likely Benji's going to blow through that cash on drugs and God knows what else in weeks. This house will be foreclosed on. OP, you're setting Benji up for failure because you refuse to make him face being an adult. You're making sure your kids will never have a relationship with each other or any support because of the resentment you're causing. My daughter Gigi is always stirring up drama. She was a tattletale as a child and has unfortunately not grown out of it in her 30s. Gigi had this one-sided feud with my daughter-in-law, Deb. It's gotten worse because Gigi and her son, Max, preschooler, moved in recently. I will spend my breakfast and dinner listening to how much Gigi hates Debbie. Debbie's a career woman, and I don't know if grandchildren are in her future. We don't ask, but this one-sided feud is caused by how Debbie hasn't given my son a child yet, and how Debbie is selfish. Now, Gigi told us that she's pregnant again. This is shocking for several reasons, but mainly because I've never even heard of my daughter having a boyfriend. In the 2 weeks that Gigi announced her pregnancy, no father's been mentioned. I asked Gigi if it was a Christmas miracle about her pregnancy, and she went off on me, saying that at least I'm not like Debbie and being selfish by not giving you grandbabies. I was in a short temper, and I told her everyone likes Debbie more than you because she's just not such a miserable cow all the time. I would rather have a Debbie move in with me than you or your babies, because at least Debbie will work her butt off to help provide for the family. Gigi's upset because I'm not, quote, happy for her and my new grandbaby, who will now be stuck living with me. My wife thinks I'm such an idiot for saying that, and I should be happy for Gigi and not praise Debbie too much, because it makes Gigi do stupid things, like trying to get pregnant to one-up Debbie. I think this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and I refuse to apologize to Gigi for what I've said. If she doesn't like it, she can move out. Not the idiot, OP. Your daughter sounds exhausting, self-centered, and honestly super shallow. Maybe your son doesn't want kids. Maybe Debbie doesn't want kids. Maybe Debbie can't have kids or your son. Either way, it's none of Gigi's business. If the only praise she can think of for her self-worth is that she can pop babies out, unlike Debbie, I'm terrified of the conditions those children will grow in. If she's trying to gain your approval by one-upping your daughter-in-law and getting pregnant, she must not know you very well. Your wife thinks you should not praise Debbie too much because it makes Gigi do stupid things, like try to get pregnant to one-up Debbie? I'm sorry, what? That sentence was so bonkers. Your wife is unhinged, and so is Gigi. The time has come. The day has arrived. The reality train is at the station. I'd be fuming if Gigi was my daughter. 100% Gigi is jealous of Debbie's life as a career woman with money who lives with her husband and not her parents while in her 30s. Gigi is a straight-up bitter hater. I tell her that it's time for her to move out and think about running her own household and providing for her children. It sounds like she doesn't have a plan to do any of these things, and she hates Debbie for having a job and proving that it's possible. Gigi needs a serious wake-up call. I, 18 female, am feeling torn about a situation that happened this past weekend. My stepdad is a huge football fan, and every Sunday, he has his buddies over to watch the game. It's been a tradition for years. I was asked to bring them snacks and drinks throughout the evening. This is something I've always done, so I didn't think much of it. However, this time things took an uncomfortable turn. While I was serving them, a couple of my stepdad's friends started making comments about my appearance. They said things like, my breasts are really coming in, and that I've turned into a real hottie. I was shocked and didn't know how to react. But what made it worse was my stepdad's response. Instead of defending me or telling them to stop, he agreed with them and added that I was a real hottie indeed. I was so upset and disgusted, not just with his friends, but more so with my stepdad for not only tolerating this behavior, but participating in it. In the heat of the moment, I stormed out of the house and went to stay at a friend's place. I didn't feel comfortable or safe being around them after those comments. I've been staying with my friend for the past few weeks. Now my mom is angry with me. She thinks I overreacted and that I should have just ignored them. She says that's how men are, and I shouldn't have been rude by storming out, especially in front of my stepdad's friends. My mom believes I should apologize to my stepdad for embarrassing him. I feel like what I did was justified, but my mom's reaction is making me second-guess myself. So your stepfather and his friends harassed you, and your mom is taking his side? You are not the idiot at all. That's just how men are? Well, you're the sort of person who gets upset and storms out. It's just how you are. Mom should just ignore it. Sounds like your stepdad and his friends are creeps. The fact that they felt comfortable saying those things out loud in front of you is concerning. You are not the person who should be apologizing. Judging by Mom's reaction, I have a pretty good idea where this is headed. Just wait for OP's next post. My mom wants to throw me out of the house because she says I'm trying to steal her husband. Your stepdad and his friends were ridiculously inappropriate, and shame on your mother for enabling them. Leaving was more than justified. It was 100% the correct thing to do. Do not serve these morons ever again. If your mother has an issue with it, she can figure it out on her own, or maybe pick up a tray herself. I hope she doesn't, though, because these clods should serve themselves. Do not back down on this. He is trash, and you don't give trash the time of day. Never mind serve it and its friends. My ex-wife, 28, Jane, and I, 28 male, divorced 4 years ago after 8 months of marriage. She was caught cheating on me. We didn't have any kids. When we divorced, I became depressed and focused on spending time on my project. And after years of struggling financially and mentally, I managed to start my own business. I'm doing quite well financially, and a year ago, I met Aisha, 25 female. We've been dating ever since, and I'm so happy to have her in my life. Jane got married a few years ago and has 3 kids, but her husband left her, and she's a single mother now. She's struggling financially to raise her kids. I feel bad for her because despite her cheating on me, she was my first love, so I offered to help her out. I've been sending her money every month since last year and would sometimes look after her kids. Aisha found out about this last week and blew up on me. She said what I'm doing to her is also considered cheating and wants me to stop because she doesn't feel comfortable. She asked me if Jane had tried flirting with me, and I said yes, but I set boundaries and told her that I wasn't interested in a relationship with her. This angered Aisha, so she dumped me. I was planning to propose next month, and my whole world disappeared in a second. I tried reaching out, but Aisha's not responding. My friends who like Aisha are disappointed in me. They called me the idiot for helping out Jane because I don't owe her anything, and she's taking advantage of me. Am I the idiot? I don't get it. You were married to someone for 8 months. She cheats on you, and then you pay her? What the heck? Why? You owe this woman nothing. You're sacrificing your relationship to fund your ex-wife? Because everything about this is so wildly dumb. You are the idiot. She cheats on you and is rewarded for her behavior by getting monthly payments? Insane. This completely OP. Why are you supporting your ex-wife who cheated on you and her 3 kids by another man? Why doesn't she go after him for child support? And you've been supporting her since last year? The fact your ex doesn't feel shameful or embarrassed taking your money is telling. Of course she flirted with you because she sees you as a meal ticket that she can use and abuse. Where's your self-respect? If someone cheated on me, I'd certainly not help them financially, regardless of their circumstance after the breakup. I'm not surprised Aisha dumped you. If I were in her shoes, I'd be upset, angry, and baffled by your behavior and suspect that you're sleeping with your ex, plus disgusted at you for being a doormat. You're still emotionally pining for your ex-wife. Aisha's correct. You were cheating on her. My ex and I have been together for 2 years and moved in together for nearly a year. She was 32 female, so I knew she was really serious about starting a family. I, 30 male, also want a family, but I wasn't in a position to start one as I worked a minimum wage job, $16 an hour, which wasn't enough to pay for an apartment by myself or really enough to live on. She was in a middle management role and used to be an accountant, so she made 6 figures. She paid for more of the joint expenses, like food and housing, but I contributed what I could. I didn't have any savings even with her help, and before we dated, I was making it paycheck to paycheck with 3 roommates. I do have a degree in political science, but have never been able to find a job that required one. I had found a job that paid $24 an hour, doing government reception work, but it was a maternity placement, so I only stayed 6 months. My ex's family really liked me and treated me well, but I'm not sure if they like me or just like that I'm a man that could have a child with her. She admitted her parents are super obsessed with her having kids, and while she wants them too, she feels rushed by them. In retrospect, I think she settled for me because we were friends before that, and I think she knew I had a crush on her, but didn't say anything. She was in another relationship before me, and I think they were talking about engagement, and he didn't want anything like that. Anyway, my ex broke up with me a few months ago. She told the landlord that she wouldn't renew the lease and gave me 2 months to move, telling me we were over. I was shocked and felt it came out of nowhere. I asked her why, and she admitted she didn't want to be the sole breadwinner and that I wasn't really homemaker material, so she didn't want to struggle through life doing everything. I do my share of the housework, and I can cook. My cooking isn't as good as hers, but I do 3 nights of cooking a week. We didn't talk about this, and I felt she decided for both of us. I told her she never said she felt bothered by my pay, and she knew I didn't make much before we started dating. She admitted she thought she could handle it, but knowing we both rely on her income is stressful, and I'm not career-focused, so she would need to be the breadwinner, and it's not what she wanted. I didn't have a choice, as she said she was already looking into another apartment, and I couldn't afford this one myself. So we parted and broke up a week ago. I'm temporarily living with my mom as I can't find a place in my price range. Her mom called me on Saturday and asked why we broke up, and I probably should have said something like, "We're incompatible," but I was pretty hurt and felt like I had no one to talk to, so I just told her everything my ex had said. She called me last night to yell at me for telling her mom because her mom demanded she get back together with me to have kids, as she's getting endlessly pestered by her that she's so old and not going to be able to have kids. I just hung up and felt a little bad because I kind of knew the situation, but I felt like if her mom asked, I could answer truthfully. But am I the idiot here? Not the idiot. You were honest. As long as you didn't lie, exaggerate, omit important details, or otherwise misrepresent what happened. If the truth is a problem for your ex, that's her problem, not yours. And even if you were still together, I think lying to her mom would have not been okay. She needs to figure out how to create healthy boundaries with her parents. This really has nothing to do with you. This is an issue that your ex needs to handle with her family, especially her mom. Come on, dude. You're not career focused? What does that even mean? Dude, figure out something. Trade school, whatever, and better yourself. A lot of women don't mind if you don't make as much, but they do care if you don't have any direction or goals in life. Best of luck to you. Yep, poor woman doesn't want to do everything. Breadwinner and do the chores on top? OP, in his own words, is not good at homemaker stuff and only cooks 3 nights a week. I'm sorry, but it sounds like a mooch. No one is good at those skills. You improve those skills. She doesn't want to support a guy and also do the heavy load when they're kids. She did the smart thing. Who cares what her mother thinks? She could go to a sperm bank and have less work than to provide for OP. Get your crap together or die alone and unloved. Your pick.